Well, Zach, Apple is out with iOS 18 this week to a broad audience of people. And I know that you have been on the iOS 18 beta and now even on iOS 18.1 beta. You're ahead of the curve. But we definitely want to dig in today about what this launch means for marketers.
Yeah, Gabe, I've been testing iOS 18.1 now for just a little over a month to kind of test out those Apple Intelligence features that Apple hyped up so much. But one of the things I think is interesting too is last week Apple introduced the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro among some of their other products too. But one of the things I thought was interesting was they're promoting Apple Intelligence in these phones as a huge selling point, all of the 16 lineup, but it's not even out yet. So they're selling these phones based on promised features. And I think that's a very interesting approach that Apple's taking this year.
I don't think it's ever anything they've ever done before, correct? Selling
I've been
into
trying to
futures.
think. I don't think they have. Maybe with Vision Pro a little bit, but it's very interesting. You know, I've got a 15 Pro Max. I've been testing Apple Intelligence. I have my thoughts there, but it's so interesting that they've got this phone for the masses. And if you go to their website, it's Apple Intelligence, Apple Intelligence, Apple Intelligence, and then the fine print coming in beta this fall.
Well, and yeah, even the features that you've been able to test in 18.1, it's not the full chat GPT integration or OpenAI integration, I should say, that they're talking about rolling out this fall. So it is an interesting way to approach the market. And one of the things that I've seen over the last week since they did announce the new iPhone 16s is that demand has been muted, for lack of a better term. And they're saying that, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't getting excited about the upgrade cycle. And I wonder if people aren't getting excited because the product isn't really available yet, and it's not something where people are actually getting excited because, again, it's not truly available, or at least it won't be for another month or two.
Well, there's a couple things there too, Gabe. It's one is, are they not excited because it's not available, or is it one of those things where it's like, oh, it's AI, it's a hype, it's a buzzword, you know? Like, do they see the value of these features? And having used them for the past month or so, I can say there is value to some of them. Now, the Chat GPT integration is still not on the beta. I'm waiting for that one. I have my action button on my 15 Pro Max. That's a lot to say. I have the action button mapped to the Chat GPT app because I've been using that more and more lately. But
Hmm.
I would love to have that built into the actual system itself.
Well, and it's going to be interesting to see over the next few weeks as iOS 18 becomes more broadly adopted, as people are forced to upgrade. I have a company managed phone, so my phone was upgraded to iOS 18 this week. I've been playing around a little bit with the new features, but I don't have one that does all of the AI functionality that you do. But as people start to play with it more, as people start talking about it more, is that going to create demand for this? And that was one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this today, Zach, was around Apple Intelligence. But one of the other big reasons that we wanted to talk about this, just around all of these changes that rolled out in iOS 18, is kind of why should marketers care? And one of the big reasons is Apple is making it more difficult to market to people on their phone. And that's a massive challenge for marketers because of some of the statistics around market share and things like that. So I'd love to start there around, again, why should marketers care? And then start to dig into some of these things that are some of these specific features that have come out in the latest release.
Absolutely. And yeah, one of the things to keep in mind is with this release, Apple's very much focused on Apple Intelligence. And we'll talk about how Apple Intelligence changes that on device experience. And then in turn, how marketers engage with people using iOS devices. But keep in mind, this is not the first time Apple has done this. A few years ago, iOS 14.5, keep me honest, Gabe,
Yeah, I believe that's
the
correct.
they had the big privacy focused, and there was I think it was mail tracking transparency or something along those lines. And as Apple takes this privacy focus and this new Apple Intelligence, we're going to continue to see, I think, I don't want to say restrictions per se, but the need for people to adapt with how you engage with people, knowing that iOS has such a significant market share in the US. And yes, I know that will make some of the Android listeners a little upset saying significant market share, but the reality is Apple is very popular, specifically in the United States.
Yeah, it's a fact. I mean, it can. I know people love their Android phones, and I know it's like religion and politics and whatnot. You can't talk about an impolite company, Apple versus Android. But the fact of the matter is iOS market share is 60% in the United States. And one of the other statistics that really jumped out to me when I was looking at this act is that Gen Z and millennials, which is obviously a huge group and a really important group for marketers, are more likely to be iPhone users than Android users, even more than that 60% market share. And I know there's a lot of blue text box FOMO, and people, if people have the green text box, they're like immediately judged. So certainly with the Gen Z and millennial crowd, we see more of that. The other one that really jumped out to me was that iPhone users have a 44% higher salary on average than Android users. And as you're looking to sell to younger people who are, with higher incomes, well, the iPhone crowd is really the target market for who a lot of folks are looking to sell to.
I love the blue text versus green text, that fear of missing out, because it's an actual thing. I had one friend who had an Android phone, and we for the longest time would be like, dude, you have to get an iPhone. We've got these group texts. We want to be able to do like these FaceTime calls, these group calls, or do all this, send this content, but you've got an iPhone, or you have an Android phone, SMS, it's just breaking the whole experience. And that's actually one of the new features I hate to say it's like one of my favorite ones, but it's been fantastic because the RCS messaging with iOS 18 is long overdue, but it's eliminated all of those SMS conversations on my phone.
Hmm.
And that's been huge. As it goes to communication too, I do have to tell you, Gabe, the satellite iMessage has been a fantastic feature. It's not something I've used outside of just like testing it out. Gabe, I think I've sent you a message. I've sent like my dad a message, like out hiking when you don't have cell signal.
Hmm.
It's nice to have that peace of mind of, oh, like I don't need my Garmin with me. I can just take my iPhone. And if I need to send a text message, I can do that. So the messaging on the new iOS 18 with select devices is another one of my favorite features, but not so much on the marketing side.
To go back to the episode we had last week, Zach, on data and storytelling, and that great ad that we were talking about around people getting saved from their Apple Watch. I guarantee you, Apple is going to be running an ad sometime in the future of lives saved from satellite connectivity because they were able to send text messages to somebody and get out of a sticky situation, whether they were hiking or in some remote location where they didn't have other connectivity. Pretty much guarantee you that's coming in the future.
I would say 100%, and I'm hoping it's not me. If it is, it's going to be me like testing it out, like, hey, test from space, and that's my Apple story, just testing it out. But it's one of those things too, and this could be a whole other episode. But in the fine print, it says, and this happened 2 years ago with the SOS via satellite. It
Mm.
said free for 2 years, and they extended that a year. But I'm curious, one, how would Apple monetize this, and two, would they even need to? It's surely not cheap to send a message to a satellite and back down. There's a lot of infrastructure in place, but it's one of those things too. I think about Gabe, and it's like the volume for this feature, while fantastic to have, I can't imagine.
I
There's
got to
millions
imagine
of
it's very
messages
low.
going to space and back. So
Hmm.
again, I think that's going to be a conversation down the road. Is can Apple and will Apple actually monetize these, or will they bundle it into one of their other managed services?
That would be if they were to monetize it like the individual text messages. That would be like the cruelest thing ever. I think it was this company Ryanair. Have you heard about this company? They were
I
an
see them on
airline.
TikTok.
Okay. And I feel like they're the one who charges you to use the bathroom and maybe even charges you to get out of the bathroom. If Apple were to monetize this and monetize text messages of somebody who was in serious danger and you had to pay $5 to send a text message to get you out of danger, that would be one of the cruelest things that anybody has ever done, but guaranteed like 100% take rate of that service.
I I almost disagree with you on the take rate. I wouldn't pay for it, but the sad thing is,
What are you gonna do? Die on a
that,
mountain because you can't send a text
and that's
message?
exactly it. I was on Reddit last night, of course, reading what other people were saying, and that was the thing. It's like, well, it's not something I'd pay for, but then like you find yourself in a situation when you need it, but you didn't pay for it. It's a tricky situation for Apple, and like I said, they just extended the free 2 years from the
Hmm.
phones 2 years ago by 1 year. So I genuinely think they're looking at this, very seriously internally. And to your point, Gabe, I don't know how you monetize it. I don't think you can do it. And now
I
that
don't
it's
know that they can
delayed a
either.
year, we're gonna find out here in 2025, hopefully.
The bundling aspect may be the way that they do it. Maybe it just becomes part of Apple One, and as part of Apple One, you get free access to that or something. That would be probably the way to do it. But it's you're right. It's a sticky situation. Well, let's jump into some of these other topics. So there are a lot of changes that happen in iOS 18 that we think marketers need to know and need to consider because it's going to impact the way that you are able to communicate with people through their phone. So one of the first ones that we wanted to go through, Zach, is email, and how Apple is actually putting some of this functionality in the email. Frankly, it looks it in classic Apple fashion. They kind of just copied with some of the best stuff that other people are doing out there, and Gmail has been doing this forever. But that on-device categorization is something that is coming to the Apple email application and categorizing these things into primary promotions, updates, so on and so forth. I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this. I know Gmail has been doing this forever, but we're starting to see this more broadly adopted in other email platforms.
I'm just laughing, Gid, because I love that of all the features we want to talk about today, somehow email snuck up like as number one. Like this is not my topic. As much as I do love email marketing, but I don't actually use the iOS mail app or the Apple Mail app. I do have the Gmail app on my phone, but with Apple Mail, I don't use that email address for really anything. It's kind of like my private email address. Like I don't use it to sign up on websites. I don't get spam to it. So I really don't use the inbox. Now, I do get a few emails to it. I get quite a few from GoPro. I feel like that's probably who emails me the most. But one of the cool things, in addition to the categorization that I like in the Mail app, is the Apple Intelligence summaries, summarizing
Mm-hmm.
emails. And that's an area where I think marketers really need to pay attention because, think of your subject lines, think of the content that's in your email. The reality is out of every email I've looked at in my Mail app in the past month, which may not be a high number, I haven't read a single one of them because I've just looked at the summary. Now, if I
Mm-hmm.
was to read the email, I would absolutely need a subject line that draws me in. How am I going to, how is the marketer on the other end of that email going to get me into their email? But at the same time, Apple is summarizing these emails. What content is in your email that you want to summary? There's no more room for fluff. You cannot do that. What are your key points, the key message you want to deliver, and how can you optimize that knowing that AI is going to summarize these emails for your customers and for your prospects?
Yeah, it's such a great point, Zach. And it really leans into all of the features that they're sort of rolling out around email. The on-device categorization that we just talked about, putting these emails into different categories based on what they fall into, the digest view, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, as well as the Apple Intelligence piece of summarizing those emails. So the key takeaway from me, if I'm a marketer trying to to still do email marketing in this very difficult world where Gmail, where Outlook, where Apple are now all sort of leaning into this categorization of promotional emails, your subject lines, your email copy has to be so good to break through. So it's so important to test those email subject lines, to test different copy, to test different calls to action, to make sure that you're able to break through, because this is just going to get more difficult, whether it's Gmail, whether it's Apple, whether it's Outlook, whether it's any of this. All of these email platforms are getting better and better and categorizing these things into different buckets to frankly make it a better user experience, but makes it more difficult for marketers who want to use email as a key part of their tactic.
Exactly. And one thing to think of too is when you build out your emails, I would 100%, send an email I'm creating to my own, Apple email just to see what that summary looks like and see if there's areas I can improve that. And yes, there's a lot of tools out there. This really isn't a great tool, but it's a great way to see how your actual message is going to come across on your customers' devices. Again, knowing that Apple has gone from this very privacy focused company to now this, AI plus privacy telling you what's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point. And I'm sure the ESPs are going to start to integrate that into their platforms where you'll start to be able to see those, hey, if I send this, what is it actually going to look like in a preview? But until all of that is fully integrated, that's such a fantastic way, Zach, to just test to see, hey, if I were on the other end of this, if I'm the person who's receiving this email as a consumer, is this AI summary hitting the key points? You're starting to see more and more of this. I think I sent you this, Zach, but HubSpot has launched a really interesting tool that where it's kind of like their website grader, but it's an AI grader where you can go in and you can actually put in your information as a business and see if people are searching for your company, what is AI going to say about your company? Because I don't know if you've noticed, Zach, but I've certainly noticed this. Google, again, has been very aggressive at rolling out AI overviews in search. I know they kind of backed off of that for a little while. It is back with a vengeance. And I would say almost all of the searches that I've done recently have come back with a Google AI overview. So we're starting to see this much more broadly adopted, especially with Google and search. So understanding how, as a marketer, understanding how AI is going to appear to your prospects or customers on the other end is going to become even more important.
I agree. And the last thing I think of here is it's another best practice I do when talking about email marketing, but I have so many people I've worked with who will do like the put an image on an email and that's it, have the text embedded in the image, that whole thing. That's not going to work. One, it's not
No.
going to work today, but two, it's not going to work tomorrow with Apple Intelligence because you're going to see this email and we're going to talk about the web browsing impact in a minute too, but the AI is not going to summarize that image, and it might in the future. But today, it's a distraction, and AI is going to gloss right over that and look for those key points within that email. So you need to be very aware of the content in your email um, as you prepare to send them.
Yeah. You used a word there, and I'm so glad you used that word because, again, it just perfectly works it as a transition into what we wanted to talk about next, which is distraction control and personalized notifications. And I know this one, Zach, has been a really interesting. You've been very curious to see how this rolls out because can you talk to us just a little bit about what distraction control is and how that functionality is potentially going to impact how marketers are sending notifications either through to a consumer's phone or what they're even going to see when they go to websites on their phone as well.
Yeah, and this is the exciting stuff now. Enough of that email content, but
should we have switched this? We got to
yeah,
keep the people listening to the end of the part that you're really excited about.
I know. We should have built. Yeah, well, that's a great lesson for bringing
Right,
people
fair
into
enough.
your podcast episode and having those retention rates. But I want to start this. There's kind of two discussion topics here: personalized notifications and distraction control.
Yes.
Now, when I look at the personalized notifications, I'm going to talk a little bit more about 18.1 with Apple Intelligence because, and this is something I've been testing out. And Gabe, I actually told you. So I have Apple Intelligence on my personal phone, and then like my Mac is not on the beta. So when I turn on the new focus mode, which is called just simply reduce interruptions, and it says limit interruptions to only important notifications. This is built on AI. What it would do is it would put my phone in this new AI notification mode, but it would put everything else on do not disturb. So there was a little bit of balancing when I was testing this, but now
Mhm.
with Mac OS, I think it's Sequoia. Yes, I hope it's Sequoia. With the new Mac OS out now, it has that built in as well. So this reduced interruption that's powered by I found it to be it's it's very nice because what I would typically do is I occasionally would just put my phone in do not disturb and be like, all right, like I am off the grid now because I don't need these notifications constantly on the weekends or if like I'm out hiking, just in the mountains trying to disconnect. It's nice to have just some time away from your phone. But with this new reduced interruptions mode, it's like I don't want to say a light version of do not disturb, but you're letting Apple Intelligence define what is an important notification and what is not. So maybe it's a text and a conversation I'm having with, my parents. Maybe Apple Intelligence deems that as important, whereas maybe a company like Amazon or even Apple, maybe a shopping notification that comes in, that's not important, right? So
Mhm.
Apple
Agreed.
Intelligence is customizing these notifications and what's delivered. Gabe, we talked a few podcast episodes about the different types of notifications, and this is exactly it. Is it something that I'm going to click on right away, or is it something that's going to sit in my notification feed for 3 hours? And this is
Hmm.
what I think is the most interesting with Apple Intelligence is, you open your phone and you've got a whole list of notifications. Apple Intelligence summarizes those now. So I've seen like on Instagram group chats when you've got people, sending messages all day, Apple Intelligence is summarizing that and saying, hey, in this notification, you have messages talking about this subject, and it's summarizing all those notifications down into one. And I think that summary is very important too, because again, go back, Gabe, we work with a lot of BSPs. So think of you as the BSP sending out that notification. Things to think about: is this important? Right? Will Apple Intelligence deem this notification important? Are they going to click on it right away? And two, if my notification is summarized into a stack, what is that summary going to look like? What is my
Hmm.
message going to look like after Apple Intelligence has has done its job?
Yeah, has done his job of summarizing. And that's the part that I think is really interesting about this is it's personalized and summarized based on user interactions. So because it's looking at all of the ways that you engage with these notifications on your phone, it is going to make assumptions based on how you've engaged in the past, which ones are important. And so if your customers don't engage with your notifications, it's going to be really difficult to engage with them in the future because they're not going to even potentially see these notifications that you're sending out. So I think that part of it is just so important as people are starting to think about, like you said, Zach, as a marketer, what is this actually going to look like in a summary? Is this something that's going to really compel somebody to act? Because if it isn't, then you're likely going to be even more buried in those notification settings than you are right now.
So what does it come down to, Gabe? It comes down to what we said with email, the subject line. What's the notification text? Is it going to draw people in, or is it going to be something it's like, oh, just swipe away? And part of that conversation too is thinking of not just the content, but the timing of your notifications. It's 10 a.m. right now. I'm at work, I'm busy. Is it a good time to send an upgrade offer to my subscribers' phones? It it may not be. Maybe it is, depending on your
Right.
data. But understanding, um, you know, the data that goes into the decisions on timing is going to be very important as well. If you schedule a notification at 7 p.m. because people are online gaming or maybe having a less than ideal experience, but your offices are closed, keep in mind all of that information as you think about the timing and the content of your notifications.
You know what all of this comes down to, Zach? I just
Being a
keep
good
thinking about
marketer.
this. Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. It's all of the stuff that Zach and I talk about all of the time, which is personalization in your marketing, timing them out to make sure that you're doing them the right way. The next one we're going to talk about, it has a lot to do around with websites, having a really good website that's mobile responsive and actually talks about the value that you're bringing to your customer. All of this comes down to just good marketing.
Gabe,
And
I think just one thing to chime in here is, we're talking about all these changes and what the impact is, and we're not saying, oh, shut down, everything's changed, you have to do things differently. No, you just have
no,
to do things. I don't want to say,
better. You've
yeah,
got to do them better.
I was gonna say best, but I was like, no one's ever been the best. But yes, you have to do things better. We need to adapt, or what is it? Adapt or die again,
Adapt or
Gabe.
die. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. It's we've got to be better. And these companies. I feel like I'm not like some like weird conspiracy guy, throwing shade at tech companies, but companies like Apple are trying to make a good user experience on the device that they're selling, and then trying to sell services around that. Well, in order to get people to buy that device, they need to provide a really great user experience. And unfortunately, people getting absolutely hammered with advertisements that are irrelevant to them is not a great user experience. So, what does Apple do? They make it harder for marketers to put crap marketing in front of people because people don't like that. So, if your marketing is crap, then you're going to lose out here, right? Like you've got to be better at what it is that you're trying to actually convey to your customers. Who is it that they want to become in the future? And how is your product or service going to help them get from point A, where they are right now, to point B? And if that's your North Star, if that's what you're looking at as being a better marketer, you're going to be fine. But people who are just sending out the same old crap are going to be in a really difficult spot with these changes that are coming from a technology perspective.
I agree. There's nothing to me more infuriating than getting a piece in the mail or seeing a digital ad that has nothing to do with my life or my lifestyle, right? Like people don't people don't like that. I think of all like the junk mail I get. It always takes me back to why do people do this? Like why are you wasting money on not knowing who you're mailing this to? So I think again, Gabe, it comes back to being a good marketer, understanding who your audience is, understanding what the objective is of your campaign or what you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
do, and taking a very I'm a data driven marketer, so I have to say taking a data driven approach to what you're doing.
Well, the reason that people continue to do things the same way is because they're terrified that if they do change, it's not going to work out and they're going to look like idiots. So the easier path is to just continue to do things the same way, even if they know that it's wasteful. And I just I hate that. All right. And when you talk about people don't like marketing or people don't like advertising, they don't like bad advertising. They don't like advertising and marketing that doesn't actually speak to them. And so that example that you just used, Zach, of crap showing up in your post office box, right? And you just immediately throwing away, that's bad marketing. And you don't like that because it is bad, right? But that's what we're here to talk about how to make this better.
Yeah, and speaking of junk showing up in your mailbox and being a distraction, back to distraction
Yes,
control.
yes, distraction control. I I know we kind of I don't want to say buried, but I know we put this one at the end. But this is one that I think is going to take more time to see how this actually impacts marketing. It's probably less impactful, or I shouldn't say it's less impactful. It's just probably going to be more difficult to measure than like open rates and click through rates in email. But this to me is probably the one that's I think potentially the most impactful for some of the changes that that are coming with iOS 18. And what distraction control is specifically is it's a customized browsing experience that eliminates unwanted web elements. And one of the first things that I saw, Zach, when I started researching this is popovers, which I see it's I can't remember. I mean, it's
Zero
been a
party data.
yes, your zero party data, but those things are just pervasive. You go to any DTC website, like I think I told you I was shopping for luggage a couple of weeks ago because my suitcase broke, and every website that I went to had a popover to give my email address to then offer me some sort of discount. When I was shopping for mattresses a year ago, that was the exact same thing. Every website I went to had a popover to gather that information. So that's one that with the way that they've built distraction control into the phone, it's actually going to block that, so people might not even see it. So if you're getting a lot of email addresses via a popover, you may not be in the future because Apple's actually going to be blocking that from iPhones as people are going and browsing around the web.
And I think this comes back to don't be intrusive, right? Like if you
Mm,
have a pop up on your website, you can set these by, okay, well, is it how much time they've spent on the page? Have they scrolled to this point? Have they clicked this? Like you can customize that journey, but you don't want to be intrusive with your popovers. And one of the things about distraction control is any user can grab their phone, select an element, and say hide. And Gabe, have you seen like the animation this does? Have you tested this out yet?
I haven't tested it now.
Oh my gosh, it like does like this Apple like fashion like vanishing thing, or just like kind of like
That's cool.
I don't know, like bubbles up and like dusts off kind of thing. It's super cool. You have to try this out. And the other part of this too, which part of distraction control is the new reader view in Safari. Have you used the reader on any websites, Gabe?
I not since iOS 18 has come out, but I have used
Okay.
it in the past for sure.
So they've customized it. I think they've made the experience better. But what the reader view is I like using it on like if I'm reading like a news article or
Sure,
something
absolutely.
like that because I just want to see the text. So I'll
Hmm.
do reader view and it's just like the text on a white background. You can customize the size and everything, but it's
Hmm.
just like reading what the article is. And I think that's the other part of this too is um, people are going to customize what that browsing experience looks like to them, whether it's hiding specific elements of your website that they may find distracting, or again, using the reader view to, I don't want to say get that summary, but they can get the summary of your website, just like we talked about getting the summary of an email. So
Hmm.
I think people are going to engage with distracting content, intrusive content less.
100%. And the three things we talked about popovers already, but just to hit on a couple of the other things that are likely to be eliminated as kind of these unwanted web elements, quote unquote, banners, which that's a perfect example, Zach, of what you're talking about with reader view. Eliminating all of those banner ads is they're just so intrusive. Like you go onto some of these, especially news websites, my goodness, they are so intrusive. It's just completely insane. And then sign in windows is another one. If you're requiring people to sign in order to see specific content, some of the sign in windows may be removed from this whole functionality as well. So again, to go back to a conversation Zach and I were having just a couple of minutes ago, have better marketing, have a great website. How are you going, if you're a marketer who's worried about distraction control and some of these other things that Apple is rolling out into iOS 18, well, you need to have a great website. You need to make sure that it's designed for mobile. You need to make sure you got a sticky header. You need to make sure that you have clear value props and benefits of what the customer is going to get out of it if they buy your thing, and start to think about other calls to action. Is it, if you're using a popover, maybe you need to convert to forms, or maybe you need to convert to a chatbot. Whatever it is, you need to think about how you're going to transition to some of these other tactics, tools, whatever we want to call them, to continue to have a great web experience. And if your website hasn't been updated in maybe a year or two, it's probably time to take a fresh look. I mean, Zach, I know we look at a lot of websites all the time for our day jobs, and there's a lot of bad ones out there, a lot of bad ones. And, I think historically people have probably said, well, a website needs to be on maybe a, 3 to 4 year update cycle. I think my view, it's even more frequently now with some of these changes that are happening with AI and how quickly this stuff is changing. It's something that needs to even happen more frequently in order to make sure that your website is still relevant for how people actually are going to engage with it.
I totally agree, Gabe. I think best practice I've always gone with is every 3 years, right? There's a lot you can change on a website, but it's always been, I've always thought of your website as your digital storefront. Like you don't want people to walk into your physical location and have a terrible experience, or be like a shack on the side of the railroad tracks that's all kind of pieced together, random text, random elements. Think of your website too. You want people to walk into the best experience. I was trying to think of like a hotel brand or something that you walk in and just like a sigh of relief, right? Like on vacation, Gabe, you're ready to kind of just relax a little bit. Don't stress people out on your website. Make sure that experience is 5-star.
Yeah, absolutely. I had that exact experience last week when I was traveling. I had to make a trip back east. I was in Virginia Beach, and I had a long day. We had customer meetings, then we had a long drive from one place to the other. And I walked into this Marriott that was a nicer hotel. It wasn't like a whatever, like a Residence Inn or something like that. It was still shockingly inexpensive, but I immediately did that, Zach. I just let out a sigh of relief, and so much of it was because of the ambiance that they had created in that place. And it was just like, oh, gosh, I feel so good to be here. I feel so good to be in this place. And and I would encourage people to think about, are people actually having that experience when they go to your website? Or to your point, Zach, is it stressing them out because there's all of these things that are coming at them and distractions, and the reason that they came is not being answered because of just poor design and a poor view of how people are actually going to interact with that site.
I mean, Gabe, think of google.com. It's the simple web page, Google logo in the middle. You know where you're at, and then you can immediately do what you're going to that website to do from page one, right? There's one, I wouldn't even say it's one click, right? It's one click, but it's such a fantastic website. Now, Apple, I'm going to throw them under the bus because I think they've gotten better, but for a while they had like one of the worst websites because like you'd scroll, they'd have like these animations of the products that would change. But
a lot of scrolling on the Apple website,
miles to get to the bottom. And they've gotten better, but for a while it was like, wait, this must have been like 2018, 2019, but it was like the cool thing to do. It would just infuriate me because to digest that content and to scroll was terrible. But Gabe, we need to do a whole episode on website design best practices and making a website that people want to spend time on. But again, that's a whole separate conversation.
It is. Yes, indeed. And hopefully people come away today from today's conversation with just a few ideas around how some of these changes are going to impact them, whether it's summarization in email with AI, whether it's thinking about this distraction control and personalized notifications. Again, unfortunately, Apple is making it a little bit harder to market to people on their phones. That doesn't make it impossible. It just means we as marketers need to get a bit more creative about how we're about this approach and go back to those fundamentals, Zach, of being better at marketing. And I think as long as we keep that as our North Star, as the thing that we're focused on, we're all going to be okay. Much like the 14.5 release created a lot of problems for email, for Facebook, tracking, those sorts of things. We've kind of gotten past that now, but it made us all take a step back and realize that there's some of these foundational, just basic things that we need to do a better job of in order to actually be successful.
I agree. And a part of me still cringes a little bit when people talk about email open rates. And, there's a whole discussion around that, but we'll save that for a future episode as well as we talk about what's new in email marketing. And as we see iOS 18 roll out to the masses, I think it's going to be very interesting to see some of the feedback from consumers. I mean, like I said,
Absolutely.
these Apple Intelligence features have been in beta. They have not yet been widely released. I think it's in public beta now, so it's coming. We could be weeks away. I would guess mid-October, late October, before we start seeing some of these. But keep an eye out. I think we're going to see a lot of cool things here in the next few weeks.
Agreed.
Awesome, Gabe. Well, thank you everyone for tuning into Buffering. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give us a follow on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn.